Senator Mike Lee joins us. Nice to see you, Senator.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Senator, tell me, what do you think is going to happen? Are the House Republicans going to negotiate a little bit? And do you expect the Senate Democrats to negotiate a little bit and give a little bit?
Well, as Representative Bachmann pointed out just a moment ago, Republicans have negotiated. Republicans have moved substantially. Where we've seen absolutely no movement whatsoever is from Democrats in the Senate and from the White House. Americans demand more, and they deserve more. But I'll tell you, though, Greta, there is one area that should give us some comfort, should give us some encouragement, in that earlier today we saw in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats coming together unanimously, approving pay for full-time active-duty military personnel. We did that unanimously. And I think that can be a model for us, making sure that a government shutdown doesn't occur in various areas of the government, the majority of areas of the government, where there's not a whole lot of controversy. I'm working on a bill right now that would keep us funded with respect to other areas of the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs, for example. We also need to keep our Border Patrol and our TSA going. And my bill would do that. I'm working on that bill right now. I've got staff up late working on that. I think that's another area where we could move legislation forward and get these things funded so that we can soften any impact of the shutdown and avoid a shutdown altogether in many areas of the government.
Is the only dispute is the main area dispute is if you can peel off these little areas like peel off to pay for the military, is the real issue that the Republicans don't want to fund Obamacare? Is that the issue? Is that, and it really, is that what's stopping this?
Yes, that is the issue. Republicans don't want to fund Obamacare. This is a law that the president's not following. This is a law that the president himself has said isn't ready to be implemented, a law that has been described by its own sponsor in the Senate as a train wreck. And it's causing millions of Americans to lose their jobs. We're not willing to fund it. We are, however, willing to fund active duty military pay. We're willing to fund the Department of Defense. We're willing to fund Homeland Security. But we're not willing to fund Obamacare.
If the president said, just hypothetically, is that will you fund the original Obamacare, and that's the one that is, doesn't have the carve-outs or the exemptions or waivers or anything else, the one that was originally planned, would that make a difference to you or not?
It might well, and it's interesting to point out, Greta, if we were dealing with that, if that's all we had ever been dealing with, then this whole idea would never have gotten momentum back in July. What caused me to sort of kickstart this movement and to start suggesting to my colleagues and our counterparts in the House back in July that we defund Obamacare was the president's own decision that he would not follow the law, his own announcement that the law wasn't ready to implement. And so our reaction to that was, look, if the president's not willing to follow it, if he says it's not ready, we shouldn't fund its implementation.
I realize that you're in the Senate, not the House, but I suspect that you have a lot of contacts in the House. What do you think Speaker Boehner is thinking tonight, or how does he resolve this from the House side?
Well, it's difficult. He's in a difficult spot because he's moved a number of times. He's offered a number of different compromise efforts, and those have been rejected flatly by the Senate each time with only minimal debate and discussion. But again, Greta, I think it's important for us to recognize where we have made some progress. We made some progress today with something that the House passed late Saturday night relative to active duty military pay. We passed that by unanimous consent today in the Senate, and I think this provides us a model, especially when we couple it with what the president said just a few hours ago, where he said he's concerned about Border Patrol, he's concerned about some of these other areas where there's really not much controversy. We can pass other bills keeping government funded in these areas, and we can do it just fine without concern about funding Obamacare, because these areas have nothing to do with Obamacare.
But here's what the president says, and Senator Harry Reid has said Obamacare is the law. The Supreme Court has held it as constitutional, and it's the job of the Congress to fund the law. So what does he do to get a law funded that he says is the law of the land? He signed it. What does he do about that?
Greta, I love this argument. I love it because it frames our argument perfectly. If Obamacare is the law, if that really is their argument, then that argument undercuts them. because he's not following the law. He's not willing to follow Obamacare as it was written. He's rewritten it now 3 or 4 times, depending on which count you take. And so with him continuing to depart from his own law, that really undercuts his argument that we ought to just follow the law as enacted, because he's not willing to do that.
Well, then we go back to my original question earlier, is that if we went back to the originally signed Obamacare without all the exemptions, the changes, the waivers, and everything else, you'd be fine with doing that. You don't like it, I realize that, but you would think that that would be, that would be your responsibility at that point to fund that law.
Yeah, I don't know that we can go back, but what I'm saying is if that had been all we were dealing with, had he never opened this door to begin with back in July, I don't think the defund Obamacare movement would necessarily have ever taken off. I don't think don'tfundit.com would have gotten 2 million signatures in just a matter of a few weeks, because Americans would never have looked at this and seen the hypocrisy of a president saying, I'm forcing this law on you, a law that you never wanted to begin with, and a law that I'm not even willing to follow. That's the whole reason why this has taken off like it has, is because the president isn't willing to follow his own law.
Senator, always nice to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Greta.